Hello, hello, and welcome back to Things We Said Today, a Beatles podcast where we talk about everything that has to do with the Beatles, the past, the present, the group years, the solo years, what's going on in the news. We usually have some very special guests here on the show, and we certainly do this time. I'm going to introduce them to you guys in just a few moments. I'm Ken Michaels, one of the three regular co-hosts of the show. Hopefully, you are familiar with my Beatles syndicated radio show called Every Little Thing. I also co-host another Beatles podcast strictly on the solo careers of the Beatles called Talk More Talk, a solo Beatles video cast. And I have my own video channel, which is loaded with Beatles content called Ken Michaels Radio. I'm being joined by Allan Kozinn, who's known for several books connected to the Beatles, From the Cavern to the Rooftop. Also, Got That Something, How the Beatles, I Want to Hold Your Hand, Changed Everything. And actually, what's right behind him are two books, The McCartney Legacy, Volumes 1 and 2, and highly praised, deservedly so, two books in a series of books on Paul McCartney's solo career. And hi, Allan.
Hello, Ken and Darren and mystery guest and everybody out there.
The mystery guest has something to do with the book in between the two McCartney books, right there.
See if you can guess.
Look at the author's name at the bottom. And also, we have Darren DeVivo, who has been a mainstay in New York radio for well over 40 years at New York's WFUV. And he's been our co-host for several years now, and he's also my co-host on Talk More Talk as well.
That's right.
He
That's
follows
right.
me wherever I go. Hi, Darren.
Hello, Ken. Hey, Alan. Hey, Mr. Mystery Guest, whose name we know, but and whose face we see, but you're not here yet.
He's about to be.
Maybe we should do an episode of like, What's My Line? With
And our guest is Steve Matteo. And he is the author of this book, which came out not too long ago, called Act Naturally. It covers in fine detail, very thoroughly, all the information you need to know about all the Beatles films, from A Hard Day's Night to Let It Be. And the reason why we have Steve on the show this time is because, as you know, it was the 60th anniversary of Help the album and consequently Help the movie. So Steve is here to talk about the movie with us. Hi, Steve.
Hi,
Welcome
Ken.
back.
How are you?
Good. Always good to have you here. You were here for the 60th anniversary of A Hard Day's Night. So you're the anniversary guy that we have here when the
Okay.
movies, when we're doing an anniversary on the movies. So after this, we'll see you in 2 years. Actually, we can have you on whenever you feel like coming on here. That's an invitation from all of us.
Thank
But
you.
anyway, we'll be talking about Help, uh, the movie, and all the information that you feature. Well, quite a lot of it in this book. But as usual, we have the latest in Beatle news to get to. Now, the biggest news for this week is to expect a major announcement on Thursday, August 14th, regarding the one-to-one box set. We'll find out, hopefully, what all the contents will be, how many discs it will take, probably any differences between the CD and vinyl. I hope we find all that out. And if there's any video component, there was a message that was posted on social media that on johnlennon.com this Thursday at 9 a.m., that's Eastern time, right? Is it 9 a.m.?
yeah.
Yeah, at 9 a.m. Yeah, New York, 6 a.m. LA, 10 p.m. Tokyo, and 2 p.m. 2 in the afternoon in the UK
Okay,
at johnlennon.com.
right. So we'll know everything we need to know, I hope, about the one-to-one box set coming this Thursday. And the box set, as we know it, will be coming out in October, right around John's birthday, maybe on October 9th. We shall see. Now, this Friday, August 15th, is a very special day. as it will mark the 60th anniversary of the Beatles' first concert at Shea Stadium. And they are calling it Beatles Night at the stadium that replaced Shea, the place where Darren lives when he's not doing our show, Citi Field. To make it a memorable night, they will have the band 1964 The Tribute performing before the game, and they will have fireworks after the game accompanied by Beatles music. But get this, the first 15,000 fans who attend the game will receive a replica of Shea Stadium. Isn't that nice? Great way to commemorate such a historic concert. I know that you will be there, Darren.
I will be there Saturday too. And there's also a struggling baseball team that's going to play a game in between 1964 and the fireworks show. It's funny that they announced, I don't know if it was a coincidence or they planned it out this way, the Shea Stadium statue
Uh-huh.
giveaway that was announced back in like in the off season as they were unveiling this season schedule and the promotion schedule. The Beatle thing, that was like a week and a half ago. That boom came out that they were going to do that. So it should be a lot of fun. And I will be there on Friday night. And I better get my Shea Stadium statue.
Do you think it will have a little replica, bandstand with the Beatles on it at second base?
You know what? Really, they should have. They should have designed something that incorporated the Beatles into the giveaway item. I don't think it is. It could be a surprise, but um, I've seen very quickly pictures of it, and I don't recall seeing a tiny little stage at second base.
Mhm.
Well, you don't know this, Darren, but the New York Mets organization, in getting in the spirit of things for this anniversary, they're playing like it's still 1965. So that's why they're playing so poorly, to capture
Okay.
what it was
Yeah.
like. It's
Yeah.
actually more like 1962, I would say.
Oh my goodness, please.
Hey, there is
This
some
is music. It's the
Shea-related bootleg
Beatles. It's
news.
not sports talk, Darren. Don't start.
There is some Shea-related bootleg news I should perhaps point out. Um, Someone has made a video of they're calling it the Shea Stadium 60th anniversary video production of the Shea concert. And what they've done is they've used all the available sources, meaning the original, the Beatles at Shea Stadium film, the bits that were in the anthology, the bits that were, out various places. But they also used AI to, first of all, upscale the video, but also to recreate She's a Woman and Everybody's Trying to Be My Baby, which there is a little bit of film of, not very much. And they use the little bit of film, but they also have AI generated, Paul singing at the mic and stuff like that. And um, it's surprisingly good. Looks a little weird. I mean, to me, Paul, at the end of each line that he sings, they leave his mouth open. They don't, and it seems to me more natural if you're singing, you're going to close your mouth at the end of the line. So that seemed weird to me. With Everybody's Trying to Be My Baby, they didn't show George as much as singing as much as they showed Paul in She's a Woman. So they have in other scenes like the helicopter and stuff like that. Obviously, they're using the soundtrack from the old HMC boot that came out a few years ago with the actual soundtrack recording of the film. But it's kind of interesting and it's out there on the internet. I probably can't say where, but if you have, I don't have 101 guitars, but I have a few.
Hmm.
That's the name of a website. Um,
Wah, wah, wah,
but anyway,
wah.
it's there, and it's worth having a look. I still probably will watch the original film, and that other people have reconstructed the complete concert as well, using the full soundtrack, but not using AI generated imagery of the Beatles singing. So uh, just seems
Ah,
worth mentioning.
I will look out for that. And oh, I know that in watching the Mets games, that Ron Darling and Keith Hernandez and Gary Cohen, they're kind of hoping that Paul McCartney might show up and they
Hmm.
can get him in the broadcast booth. That would be very cool if he did that.
That would be extremely cool. I got to see where my seats are.
That would be a game
Maybe I'll be
collectible.
near the booth. I might have different seats than my normal season tickets, so maybe I'll be up near the announcers.
Hmm. Okay.
Maybe they'll ask me to come on with them.
Well, well, if you run
Probably
into him,
not.
tell him he should come on the show.
I'll be on for that one, Ken. You can pencil me in.
All right. He's always willing to help out. A major passing to report in the Beatle world, as we just lost Bobby Whitlock, who, along with Eric Clapton, formed Derek and the Dominoes and played keyboards on almost all the songs on George Harrison's landmark All Things Must Pass triple album set. On the also iconic Layla and other assorted love songs, Eric Clapton and Bobby Whitlock co-wrote most of the songs, including Tell the Truth, Bell Bottom Blues, I Looked Away, and Why Does Love Got to Be So Sad? Eric Clapton posted to social media saying, Our dear friend Bobby Whitlock has passed at 77. Our sincere condolences to Bobby's wife Coco and his family on this sad day. R.I.P. Bobby. So, and just before we started recording, Steve told us that he interviewed Bobby.
Yeah,
What was that experience like?
he was great. I mean, he was really easy to talk to. He talked for a long time. He really enjoyed the interview. He was at a really good place. I forget how long ago it was. I mean, 10 plus years ago it was. And he would tour with his wife, Coco. And I believe she was either married to or involved at some point with Delaney Bramlett, but I'm not sure about that. And Bobby went through what a lot of people went through after the 70s. He got off, drinking drugs. He was completely straight.
Hmm.
He was, very happy. He was living down south, I believe, and he was really easy to talk to. I mean, Layla is a classic album. I mean, one of the things I remember him telling me was what a lot of what they were trying to do with the album was him and Eric were trying to be Sam and Dave, essentially. And that was vocally, that was what they were going for. They were the two sort of principal singers.
Ah,
And I always find that I don't know if any of you have read the recent biography that came out about Leon Russell, but it's a fantastic book. I mean, it is just amazing. I'm sorry, I'm forgetting the name of the author. I think he's a musician, um, also. And what he gets into, and I'll make this brief, what he gets into in the book is talking a lot about this connection between the sort of, All Things Must Pass and Mad Dogs and Englishmen and Delaney and Bonnie and Leon Russell and the Shelter People and the Tulsa Crowd and Denny Cordell and Shelter Records
hmm.
and the whole sort of thing. Rita Coolidge is involved in it. And it's something, it's a subject that's always fascinated me. It's not the whole book talking about that, but they get very deeply into that. And Clapton was so influenced. The other three guys in Derek and the Dominoes are all Americans. So, Clapton was really into American music, from the get-go with blues, but he really got into the whole Delaney and Bonnie thing.
Hmm.
And that's how he basically made his first album. It's produced by Delaney, and he very much sounds like Delaney. If you think of how long it took Eric Clapton to make a solo album,
Solo record.
you know?
Yeah,
And
he loved being that brief period of time in Delaney and Bonnie and Friends because he didn't have to be Eric Clapton. He didn't
right.
have to have the spotlight. He didn't have to be called God. He could just play his guitar and make music that he really was into.
Yeah.
And they said, "Hey, you got to do your own record." And like you said, that's a great description. It sounds like a Delaney and Bonnie album because well, they're all behind him on that album,
Yeah.
Eric Clapton.
There's so many of those people. I mean, it's a long, you would think Eric Clapton, he would have done this early on, but he was in the Blues Breakers, he was in the Yardbirds,
Mm.
he was in Cream, he was in Delaney and Bonnie. I mean, he was in the group, the album, Delaney and Bonnie on the Road,
Right.
with Eric Clapton. I mean, and of course George Harrison is,
Right.
plays with them too. There's a really great box set. It looks like a case for guitars and stuff. And it's all these nights that they did in London, I believe, or through the UK or through Europe. And George is all over it. And
Hmm.
you can find that box set. It's a beautiful package and it's got some great music. But it was great. And I wish I had seen Bobby play because he would come through occasionally and play like the Cutting Room or a venue like that size in Manhattan. And if you listen really close to Layla, I mean, it's him and Eric are
Yeah.
singing most of it. And of course, the other members, Jim Gordon, unfortunately, he's in jail.
No, he
The
passed.
whole tragic. I'm sorry.
He passed.
Oh, he did pass, right?
Yeah,
The
yeah.
whole
Carl
tragic,
Radle too. Yeah.
right? The whole tragic story of him and
Yeah.
Carl Radle has passed also. So I mean, that Derek and the Dominoes essentially came together on the All Things Must Pass album. So I could talk about this all day, but Bobby was just a sweet guy. He did some solo albums
Yeah.
that I believe they're out there on CD, and he's just good people, and he's got that unique sort of Southern kind of rock and roll take on things. And he was very easy to interview, and I'm thrilled that I was able to do it because he was a great guy. We did it over the phone. I didn't get to do it in person.
Mm. I have,
And
and it's on YouTube. I guess it's from the box set. It's from Delaney and Bonnie in Copenhagen, and George is on stage with them. I don't really see Bobby in the film, but he is playing there. So he did work with George that early on with
Yeah.
Delaney. So
There's also a really big um, Layla box set. It's this huge thing. To me, I have it.
mm,
And if you can find that
yeah,
too, that's really well done.
yeah,
And it's
it
all
is.
Tom Dowd was the producer essentially, or engineer producer for that. And there's a lot of great outtakes. There's a lot to it.
I think they in a way they included that live album in concert, but am I getting that mixed up with something else? There was another release of the live performances, but I know the box set you
Right,
mean. And before we move on, I got to acknowledge one of the great ballads ever, Thorn Tree in the Garden,
right. Which
last song
Bobby
on the
wrote.
Layla album.
Yeah,
That was pretty much solo Bobby Whitlock
yeah,
wrapping things up. Gorgeous song.
yeah,
hmm, okay. Sorry to hear this news.
yeah. Only 77. I mean,
All right. On July 29th, Paul McCartney attended the graduation ceremonies for his Liverpool for Performing Arts. 420 students from over 30 countries graduated, and there were 9 companionships awarded for outstanding achievement and contribution to student learning. One of those people who received a companionship was director Sam Mendes, who's currently working on the 4 Beatles biopics, but he was not physically there. He sent a video message. From Beatles author David Bedford, a new musical is coming to Liverpool this September, written by his friend Ian Salmon, directed by, he says, the great local director Stephen Fletcher, and starring Andrew Schofield. It's called Shake It Up Baby, and it tells the story of the Beatles in Hamburg. Also, you can see the Laurel Canyon Band with Mark Hudson, Gary Burr, and Mark Morando performing the music of Crosby, Stills, and Nash, and Young too, at the Cutting Room in New York City on August 19th. I mentioned those 3 musicians since they all work with Ringo as part of the Roundheads, and Gary Burr still working with Ringo. And I did see them just recently doing a show. They sound fantastic. Their harmonies are amazing. Sometimes you'd think they sound a lot like Crosby, Stills, and Nash, the 3 of them together. Our good friend Jeff Slate will be performing a John Lennon birthday bash at his new residency. at the legendary New York club Cafe Wa. He has a residency there now. And
Oh,
that'll be
good.
October 5th, 6:30. Now, a group that I mention every year that does a Lennon tribute around the anniversary of his death, Theater Within, will be doing one at Town Hall in New York City, the date being December 12th. We'll have more details on that once we hear who the performers will be. Now, there's an interview online that I'd like to recommend for your viewing, as a number of Beatle fans have already pointed it out to me. Elliot Mintz is interviewed by Billy Corgan for his podcast called The Magnificent Others, and Corrigan is known for his years with the Smashing Pumpkins. This is the first time I ever saw any of his shows. He's an excellent interviewer.
He is.
He's it's interesting because he's a music industry insider and he can talk about the business since he's experienced so much in his career. This interview has Elliot talking about his beginnings in radio and his life with John and Yoko. And among the interesting things Elliot had to say, he
Hmm.
actually said this with us too when we interviewed him recently, was that John was very jealous of Paul McCartney's success. If you get a chance, check it out. Billy Corrigan interviewing Elliot Mintz. Some book news. The artist known as Shannon, known for her work on the Beatles and other legendary celebrities, will have her new book out of her artwork on the Beatles, originally slated for August 24th, now has a November and December date. The book is called Hard Day's Night Coffee Table Art Book. And if you'd like to sample Shannon's work on the Fabs and other iconic names, you can pre-order her book on her website, which is artistshannon.com. You can also get it through Cavern City Tours. And Denny Seiwell will have his own autobiography coming out. It's called The Best and Worst of Times. It'll be released on paperback. Denny wrote it with author Robin Flans. It takes you through his life as a busy studio drummer and his time in Wings and continuing doing session work later on with the likes of Leon Russell, Rick Danko, Joe Cocker, and also his work in film scores. It's 180 pages long and it's due out September 23rd. Thanks to John Bazzini for that information. We'll have to get Denny back here on the show.
Mhm.
One of the best guests we've had, definitely. And finally, for those of you who are Raspberries fans, as many Beatle fans are, there will be a Raspberries tribute album coming out September 12th called Play On. It's a double CD, and a lot of performers are on there that we've heard of, but the Hudson Brothers make a return.
Hmm.
Yay! They do All Through the Night on the album. And John Borak, who was a guest on my latest Beatles trivia show, is on the album because he has a band called Pop Dudes, and they do Driving Around, the Raspberry song. So I know many of you love the Raspberries, as I do. This will be coming out September the 12th. That's all the news we have for you at the moment. Okay, so as I said earlier, the focus on the show this time is for the Beatles film Help. And the actual release date for Help in the US was August the 25th. And before we talk about information about the movie, I just want to get an idea of what your reaction was between the three of you the first time you saw the movie. And did you see all the Beatles films chronologically? Just want to get an idea before we delve into the movie. Why don't we start with Steve?
I probably saw it for the first time on television because when it came out, I was pretty young, so I don't think I would have gone to the movies to see it.
Hmm.
And I don't remember, chronologically, I would see these things as a child. I mean, I was into the Beatles as a small child, certainly. Um, but I mean, it's the Beatles. How could you not love it? It's Help. It's like a fun movie. You could just watch it as just a movie. It almost doesn't matter in some ways that it's the Beatles. And I love spy movies. I love British movies of the 60s. So, what's not to like?
Oh, I can totally agree with you there. But you may have a different perspective. You watched all the Beatles movies chronologically and how you viewed them. Alan?
Um, I'm gonna have to be about as vague as Steve was about when I first saw it. I don't really remember. I think I saw them chronologically. But it was like, we're going back 60 years, guys, you know.
Hmm.
And even though I'm probably the oldest person in the room, I can use that as an excuse for my memory. But yeah, I mean, I loved it when I first saw it. Subsequently, I began to, I don't dislike it, but I kind of think I like Hard Day's Night more, significantly more. Um, what I mean, yeah, when I I say that, but if I were to put on Help now and watch it, it would be, fun all the way through. So that's sort of like a theoretical, intellectual approach of, yes, I like Hard Day's Night better because I just do. I mean, Hard Day's Night is them more or less, much as John complained about how it wasn't really. And Help was sort of a fantasy film, and it's got all those other elements, the spy stuff and all that, which we'll talk about with Steve. But it's different than and maybe my attitude also has been colored by the fact that the Beatles themselves talked about, especially John, how they were extras in their own film and
Right.
only off getting high and all that stuff. So maybe that's colored the way I look at it. That's no pun intended, seeing as it was the one.
In
Um,
the color.
anyway, so Darren,
Well, sometimes there's a danger in being over analytical.
yeah,
I've said that many times, and sometimes why can't you just appreciate it for what it is?
yeah,
These days, I'm so used to hearing it's a good film, but it doesn't compare to A Hard Day's Night. And you shouldn't go into the film thinking that way.
probably. But I mean, my job in my life was sitting there over analyzing things, so I just can't help it.
Right. Darren?
I'm going to take a very unintellectual approach. No, I'm kidding. I was 5 months old when the movie opened. Um, I think I saw, I think I saw Help for the first time probably around the same time and the same way I saw A Hard Day's Night and probably definitely Yellow Submarine as well. Being from New York City, when I was a kid and growing up in the 70s, Channel 5, which today is Fox 5, WNYW, but back in the day it was WNEW um, TV. They would show Beatle movies on occasion.
Hmm.
And
On
I
holidays
remember
usually.
there was some New Year's Eves at midnight. They would show one. I remember one New Year's Eve, everyone was like, Happy New Year. And I ran to my bedroom as soon as we were done to put on Channel 5 and watch. I seem to remember Yellow Submarine maybe a little more on Channel 5, but I saw Help somehow, and I'm assuming it was, this kind of like late night, you know, independent TV station. It would have been Channel 5, WNEW. Um, I do not remember my reaction to it, but it had to be positive. I mean, there was nothing that the Beatles did that I didn't like as I discover things. Um, and I got the Help album probably, around maybe I'd say 1973, 4 or 5. And I would think that around that, in that ballpark, I saw the movies, plural, for the first time. And it was a case where, it was in the good old days when like when the TV guide would come out at the end of every week, and I'd devour the TV guide to see what was coming on. I would actually get into the habit of looking to see if Channel 5
Mhm.
was going to show a Beatle movie. Just look through each night of the week around midnight because that's when they would be on, or the James Paul McCartney TV special. That was how I saw that.
Hmm.
But I love Help, and I like it almost as much as I do A Hard Day's Night. I kind of, think of the two movies as one. Just one's in black and white, one's color. Um, and one is a bit more action, and the other is more of a kind of a lengthy music video. Um, I think there's some very funny scenes in Help, and every so often I can't avoid the urge to call them the Beatles when I'm on the air on WFUV or make a reference to a fiendish thingy or something.
Hmm.
So, you know, I wish I would have seen it in the theaters. I saw Let It Be in the theaters, but I was 5 at that time. Still the baby here on the block, but
Mhm.
in more ways than one, actually. So, um, I loved Help. I know I did because, again, like I said, there was nothing they did at that time in the 70s as I discovered it all. There was nothing of theirs that I didn't like.
I remember the first time it was on TV, actually. Don't remember the first time I went to see it, but I remember the first time it was on TV, and I think it was on Channel 7, which was ABC.
It
Um,
could have been. It could have been. I wonder if they would have rolled that out. I don't think they would have. They used to do during the week. Channel 7 would do something like the movie of the week. It'd be on at like 4
yeah.
in the afternoon. But they would do themes sometimes, and I don't. They probably didn't have access to all the Beatle films, but
No.
it could have been 7. Could have
And it
been.
was
Yeah, it could have been. Definitely could have been.
and it was kind of special that they were doing it. I mean, it got a lot of publicity, and we were visiting relatives the day that it was on. And so I sort of sidled into the, room where their TV was and sat down and started watching it. And my parents are, come on, Alan, we're visiting. And I'm
Yeah,
going,
we're
what, are you
visiting.
kidding me?
Ma,
This is the
Ma,
Beatles.
don't sit on her bed. Sit
Yeah.
on the floor.
Sort of like the Woody Allen scene in Annie Hall, where he's in the bedroom watching the basketball game.
Yeah.
Which we can't really talk about here on a show like this, how it kind of that scene evolves.
That's
And,
too
I
funny.
think you're all making a point of like, um, there was a time, and I don't want to scare anybody out there, when there was no streaming, no Blu-rays, no DVDs, no VCRs, where the way you saw films, unless you went to a movie theater, was they would be rerun on television, usually on the odd channels or late at night or on weekends. And the Beatle films would often be shown because it was special. They would show them on like holidays. So you would be this, kid at somebody's house on a holiday or your own house, and you're tired of the adults. And there would be, I could remember watching Yellow Submarine on television. So this was how you saw these films,
Yeah.
you know. I mean, unless you were older and you lived in a city where there was an art house and they would maybe show these things, the way you saw it was they'd be rerun and obviously with commercials on commercial television.
Yeah.
And and that was an experience unto itself. That was the way you saw it became kind of the ex part of the experience that you had, and it was the window into this to this world and who they were.
And it made it even more special because nowadays we just take it for granted. We can watch these movies anytime we
Yeah.
feel like it
Yeah.
and go on YouTube and watch it. But when you knew it was going to be on television, you made sure you were home for it. Or if you were visiting your relatives, you knew exactly what time it was on, and you had to watch it just then.
Right.
So,
I got my first VCR in 1978 because A Hard Day's Night was going to be on that week.
The old VHS. Nice.
I
Yep.
still have I still have this. And
Yeah,
I
I
mean,
have.
this has come out so many times.
Yeah.
I have this one, and then here's a DVD
Yep.
package, okay? And then here's a Blu-ray package,
mhm.
okay? And I don't know if any of you folks there have this monster.
Of course, you
This
have
thing is
to. It's got the
fantastic.
script in it.
I mean, what it has in it is just beautiful.
Yeah.
And I didn't get this when it first came out, but I bought it, down the road. These would like you couldn't find this or they were really expensive. And then every once in a while they would pop up on eBay or whatever, brand new, sealed, and you can get it, and it has all this amazing stuff in it.
Yeah.
You really can't see with the glare and everything,
Yeah.
but
Mm.
so and they're
It's
all in great condition. Everything I keep things in good condition.
Well, I can remember, in my case, there was a movie theater in Brooklyn. I think it was the King's Theater where they showed Help when it came out, and I saw it then, and I saw Help before I ever saw Hard Day's Night. I don't know why that is, because I was certainly aware of the Beatles once I Want to Hold Your Hand was a hit. So from that moment on, I was, so plugged in on the Beatles in '64, but I was 4 years old then. I can't believe I wasn't aware that the movie was out for A Hard Day's Night, but I did see Help, and it's one of the biggest experiences I've ever had as a Beatle fan because I was mesmerized just seeing them on the big screen and seeing them in color. And everything was just shot so well. The cinematography was amazing throughout this entire film.
Mhm.
And a magical thing about them is not just their personalities, but how well the music worked with every scene that they were in. Maybe it's just because the music was so great, any of their songs would have worked well.
Mhm.
But how can you not think of skiing on the Austrian Alps when you hear Ticket to Ride?
Yeah.
Or think of Another Girl when the Beatles were in the Bahamas playing it. It's just everything was just set so right for each song. And I loved the whole plot of the whole film, and it even had slapstick in it, to some degree when Ringo's pants fell down when the scientist was trying to get the ring off Ringo's finger with that machine, that kind of stuff. Um, so many great
And
memories I
lots of
have.
classical music too.
What's
They
that?
Ninth, a lot of classical
Yeah.
music in there too. As I think we talked about with Bruce a little.
Hmm.
Mhm.
Well, certainly going to talk about it with Steve.
Yeah, I get into this. What you mentioned, Alan, I get into this really deeply in the book about the particular music and even what was the actual recording that they probably used or they did use. I really researched this deeply
Mm.
because I thought it was significant. And I mean, that's one of the things I know some people don't like sometimes with these films, this sort of instrumental music, whether it's the George Martin music or found music or whatever it is, they just want to hear the Beatles and they don't want that stuff. And to just change gears for a minute to talk about what Ken just said, and I might have mentioned this on one of the previous times I was on, is Richard Lester preferred Help to A Hard Day's Night. And one of the reasons why he did was because of the work of the cinematographer. He felt it was a breakthrough in terms of color cinematography.
Mhm.
And it wasn't like he was saying it's a better film because of me. It was more about the cinematographer. And I think he had more fun with it. I think with A Hard Day's Night, it was like they really didn't know what this thing was going to be, you know? So once they did it, I think as far as the filmmakers, I think it kind of freed them, particularly Lester, to kind of do what we want and have fun with it. And the fact that maybe the Beatles checked out here and there maybe in some respects made it easier for him because they were kind of docile in some ways,
Mm.
you know, and it was more of a movie than A Hard Day's Night. I mean, again, A Hard Day's Night is a great film. It stands as an important film in the 1960s in terms of culture and British films. So Help is definitely not as good a film. It's not as important of a film. But I think if you can just separate and you can just, we're Beatle fans. So for us, we have a special love for it. You can just watch it and you can just have fun with it. And again, I've said this 100 times. I love British spy films. I love the Bond films and, all the kinds of British spy films, whether it's a serious film like The Spy Who Came In From the Cold or these spoof films. I don't know if you folks know about these Euro spy films. If you know about this subgenre of films, they're very obscure. I
Mm.
mean, you can find some of them on YouTube, or you can see them like on Tubi, or maybe they'll even show up on Prime. But they're like sort of British James Bond knockoffs, but they're like, French, Spanish co-productions, and the stories are kind of leaky, and sometimes the production values are low. But there's something about these films. There's a whole book about Euro spy films,
Is
and
it like the
it's
spy
this cool
genre of
thing.
spaghetti westerns?
I mean, I don't know how to really describe it other than obviously people saw, okay, these James Bond films are huge. They're making a lot of money. So we're in Rome, we're Italian filmmakers. We're going to make our own. Then they're often really poorly dubbed,
Hmm.
or they have bad subtitles. Or sometimes you watch these films and they're dubbed and then all of a sudden they go into Italian and then they go back into, the dubbed English. I mean, I would just, for the three of you and for the people who are watching out there, who watch this kind of show, you might really appreciate this stuff because it really is a lot of fun. I mean, I'm sure if Quentin Tarantino was here and his face would light up and he can tell you he could talk for 3 hours about it. It may not be his favorite subgenre of film, but it is a fun thing. And it kind of goes into the 70s, and there's certain people who show up in these films over and over again. And I don't know if you know who like Jess Franco is, or Mario Bava. I think they've made these films. But they're exploitation films very much, but they're called Euro spy films. And so you could almost, if you wanted to, you could legitimately classify a Hard Days, I'm sorry, Help as a Euro spy film.
Yeah.
So Google it. I mean, you can find these films on YouTube for free, and they may not be in the best transfer or whatever, but they're fun.
There's a very detailed entry on Wikipedia about Euro spy films.
Hmm. There
It
was
is a
something that
thing for
Ken said.
cinemaphiles, you know.
There was something that Ken said when we were talking about our early memories of Help about Ticket to Ride on the Alps.
Yeah.
And that sort of made me think of, one aspect of Help that I think is better than Hard Day's Night, and that is the staging of the music clips. Because in Hard Day's Night, we except for the title song, which first we have them being chased, and then we have them in a helicopter, and Can't Buy Me Love, where they're going around in the field and then they're being chased again, past the guy stealing the car. Um, Otherwise, the clips are pretty much all just like them rehearsing for their show or playing their show. Whereas in Help, you've got, the one clip where they're sort of in the studio. I mean, first of all, them being in the recording studio is always a cool thing to see, even if it was
Hmm.
staged in a film studio. But, there was that for, and then Ringo's drum being sawed under, and the Stonehenge in the background, that's kind of cool. And then Ticket to Ride. So I think for the music clips, Help was a lot more inventive than A Hard Day's Night was. And so I guess that's one area where I would have to concede that Help is better.
Actually, I should have known better. It was done in the train, so
Well,
that
that's
wasn't like
true.
a performance one.
That's true. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Then I take it back. Hard Day's Night was better.
But I want to go back to something that I think you were just talking about, Steve. Would you say that with A Hard Day's Night, what was extremely important for the film was to establish the different personalities of the four Beatles, figuring that this is the first time a lot of fans are really going to hear them talk. That was that was a big goal for that film. By the time of Help, you knew the differences between the four of them. So there was a lot more dialogue in A Hard Day's Night, certainly than Help. Whereas, I guess to compensate and help, that had to be a lot more action around them. So that's part of why Help turned out to be that way. But it's really interesting. And you mentioned in your book about this whole the spy fight thing. They had people who were involved with James Bond films who were involved with Help. Maybe you might want to get into that.
Yeah. I mean, this is again, I think we may have touched on this in previous interviews, but this was one of the things that I found was the people that worked on these films of the Beatles worked on other important British films. And in many cases, they worked on the James Bond films.
Hmm.
or they worked on other important spy films or whatever the case may be. So, there's that connection. There's the Bond Beatles connection. I think a guy didn't he write a book in the last couple of years where it's about the Beatles and James Bond? I read it. I think I wrote about it. It's a great book. It's really a lot of fun, and he did great research. I'm sorry I don't remember his name or the title of the book,
Hmm.
but I mean, so the first James Bond movie comes out in 1962. So it's a few years before A Hard Day's Night comes out, and 3 years before Help comes out. So, the first Bond movie was huge, but it just kept getting bigger. It's this thing that just kept growing. I always think it's so interesting that sort of James Bond and the Beatles kind of happen in the same place at the same time. They start. It's interesting. Of course, the Ian Fleming novels, I mean, he wrote those novels years before the films were made. And I think he only lived long enough to see the first film, Ian Fleming. And I believe he passed away after that. Never saw the other films.
How
He never
sad.
saw the success of it. I don't think he was all that crazy about the first film. But I mean, part of the reason why, the first film, the first Bond film is set in Jamaica is because that's where Ian Fleming lived. It's interesting now, Chris Blackwell owns what is what is the name of it?
The record company.
Um,
Island?
no, no, the place. It's one of the James Bond titles. See, this is what happens when you get to a certain age.
The first.
GoldenEye. GoldenEye is where Ian Fleming lived. And GoldenEye is now owned by Chris Blackwell, and it's like a series of really expensive bungalows that you can go and stay at there. And Chris Blackwell was actually involved with the first film. His mother was somehow involved with the film, and he was like a young kid working on that film. And I'm really going off on a tangent.
Hmm.
Darren, I sound like Vince Skelton now, right? Going off on a tangent. So reel me back in, Ken.
Well, I was going to say that because you mentioned the first James Bond movie, which was Dr. No, and that was 1962. That's exactly the same year the Beatles had their first record out. So there's always that parallel, you know. And I wanted to bring up just the very beginning of before this movie was made of Help. You say in your book, and I hadn't known this before, that the initial plot was that Ringo was fed up with being famous and he decided to have himself bumped off
Yes,
before changing his mind.
right.
I never knew that before.
Right. But there was another film being made, and I forget what the name of it is, but I believe the film director was Philip DeBracca. I think I'm saying his name correctly. And he makes these wonderful films. And I forget if it was Alan Delone, I think, made a number of them. And they're these very sort of fun, frothy kind of European films, but they're very well done. They're very well made. And so when they knew that this other film was being made with almost a similar, um, kind of plot, they immediately dropped it and they didn't do it. And again, I talk about this pretty deeply. There are a lot of similarities between the story of Help and The Moonstone, the novel by Wilkie Collins, which, too complicated to get into here, but there's a lot of parallels between. It's not the exact same story or anything like that, but there are certain plot points and there are just certain things about the story and which is really interesting. I mean, they kind of, it kept changing. Obviously, everybody knows it was originally going to be called Eight Arms to Hold Me,
Hmm.
or Hold You. I always forget what the exact is. I've heard so many different variations, but it was very fluid. And of course, Richard, for whatever reason, and I can never really nail this down. Richard didn't use Alan Owens for the second film, and there were so many different people that were kind of, maybe going to write it or whatever. And I think that him and the screenwriter eventually, the original screenwriter, had a falling out. One of the things that is not fun about doing a book like this, and I do this with my articles, is I tend to continue to research it after it's done.
Oh,
You know, and it may, either officially or unofficially, and you're always finding new pieces of information. And sometimes, unfortunately, you find things that, whether they are true or not, can be contradictory to research that you found before. I always try to find, journalists, you're really supposed to, you can't just have one source. You really should have two or three sources for a piece of information. But these things change. Mark Lewison is always uncovering new things all the time. It's his level of research and scholarship, and certainly Alan, your books. I mean, I think these books that you're writing on Paul McCartney are very much like that, like the way that Mark Lewison works, where the research is so deep rather than just repeating some of the same things in the past. And of course, obviously, if you're interviewing people who were there, that's always the best way to do it. Although sometimes different people remember things different ways,
Mhm.
either for, good or ill, you know. So it is fascinating, kind of this how the story comes about. I think with A Hard Day's Night, we know more specifically and structurally how the story comes about. With Help, it's a bit more fluid.
Okay. So what was the reason, since you mentioned Alan Owen, why he wasn't chosen for the second
Right,
time?
he wasn't. And it's one of the things I never really could ascertain why. I mean, I think I assume why is because Allan was chosen to write A Hard Day's Night because they wanted somebody from Liverpool, and he was kind of a known person. He was a playwright, and he could hang out with them, and he could get the language and get all the sort of humor and all of that. But then they just moved on, and like there was never any chance that he was going to be working on the screenplay for Help.
Okay. I have a bunch of other questions, but I think I should pass it along to my colleagues here. So why don't we start with Darren?
can you compare how Help did at the box office in 1965 with how A Hard Day's Night performed a year earlier?
I mean, I think at first it didn't quite hit it out of the park like A Hard Day's Night. But again, because all these kids wanted to go see the Beatles again, and because at this point the Beatles are even bigger, it did well. There's no question about it. It did well. The first two films both did both did very well. It's is as we go forward where things start to drop off. But I mean, you have to remember how big the Beatles are in 1965. I mean, yeah, they were big in 1964 also, but by 1965, you have even so many more kids who want to go out and see it. And I think one of the things that happened with Help, more than with A Hard Day's Night, was this going back and seeing it again. This constantly going. And it's not, well, I think A Hard Day's Night people saw it, maybe they went again, but with Help, there was a lot of repeat business where people were going back and seeing it. And they opened it up, I believe, wider when they put out Help compared to A Hard Day's Night because they knew we know what we have now. When they put out A Hard Day's Night, they really didn't know what they had.
Mhm.
And talk about how A Hard Day's Night morphed into Help. When the plans were put in place to do a follow-up to A Hard Day's Night, the Beatles' reaction to doing a second film, kind of in a nutshell, give us a kind of a summary in a way of the genesis of the film, Help.
It's a longer story in the book, but I mean, essentially, the easiest way to describe it is just like everything they did, they finished an album and eventually, we're going to make another album. You put out a single, eventually, we're going to put out another single. We do a tour, eventually, we're going to do another tour. It's the same thing. Oh, we're going to make another movie. I think it was called Beatles 2 in to start with. It was just that was it. We're now at that point. Okay, we're ready to make the next movie. Like they didn't even think about it. They didn't even pause. There was no question of not doing another film. I mean, obviously there was different ideas bandied around about how they were going to do it, but it was just basically Richard Lester's going to do it, and we're just gonna make another film. So I'm kind of oversimplifying it because there is a process in terms of, well, what are we going to do this time? And everybody, when you read interviews with people or you do research, sometimes different people have different opinions of what actually happened, in terms of what was the sequence. And, that's kind of how it is. So, there was no thought put into it, really. We're just going to make another movie. Like everything they did up to a certain point, and then the Beatles kind of said, wait a minute, hold on. And they wanted to take more control of things. Particularly, obviously, they didn't want to tour anymore. So, which comes later. It comes in 66. And that's when they really grabbed a hold of the whole machinery of the Beatles. Where in the past they would just be like, Brian would say, okay, it's time to make a movie, it's time to do a tour. Or George Martin would say, we need a single, or it's time to make an album, or we should put out an EP or whatever. Like the Beatles would just kind of more or less just kind of go along with things. So that's Help was part of that period where and I think you all know this, where they just kind of said, okay, great, then we'll just make another movie.
But they
Did they
also
have
knew
any
that,
input? I'm sorry, Ken.
just going to say, but they also knew they were under contract for 3 films.
Right. Of course, there was that too, but we know how that worked out, how that got dragged along too. Just
Yeah.
because they were in the contract, if they didn't fulfill that contract for that third film, obviously until Let It Be, 5 years after Help. So, but yeah, of course, you're under contract to do it, and so yes.
Hmm.
I'm sorry, Darren. So what were
Yeah.
you, what were you
Sorry.
going to say?
And how much, if any, input did the four Beatles have with Help when it came to things maybe that were in the script that they weren't crazy about, or they're suggesting a change, or were they just going along for the ride and whatever was put in front of them was fine with them?
I mean, I think in many respects, even though A Hard Day's Night was their first film, they were keeping an eye on things. Remember the whole idea of getting Lester to do it and not doing one of these silly, you know, pop bands in a movie was they wanted it to be a certain kind of thing. And I think they were always kind of watching what was going on and how it was evolving. With Help, I think there was sort of I think we talked about this before we started recording, the whole thing of, John Lennon saying we were basically extras in our own film. So they were enjoying the pleasures of tea, and they were, kind of didn't care. They were like,
Yeah.
whatever. I think they trusted Richard Lester too. And I think they saw that there were all these very professional people working on the film. And I think they were just enjoying the fruits of success. And I think that they were they were they were getting into pot. I mean, there's no question about it. And it was informing them. One of the things I talk about in this chapter is I give the whole long story of how Dylan turns them on to cannabis. I get into the whole story, and I try to be very accurate with it. So, there's all of this going on. They're just focused on the songwriting, you know. And I think that people forget this period for me, it's 65, where they sort of have completely shed the sort of early yeah, 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 and covering R&B and rock and roll songs. But before they become, into psychedelic music, this is such a rich period for them in terms of their singles, these sort of perfect pop singles, Ticket to Ride and Help and 8 Days a Week. And to me, this is this is such a sweet spot, I think, for the Beatles, where they are writing these sort of perfect pop songs, and they have, kind of really mastered their relationship with George Martin in the studio, and they're able to just do this. It's just incredible. Even like a song like, No Reply, and, things off of Beatles for Sale, an album that is often, not given its, props.
Hmm.
There's some really great songs on that
Oh
album,
yeah.
this period, the end of 64 into 65, sort of into early 66. So to them, yeah, we're just making this other movie. I know we're going to get to go to the Bahamas, which I'm sure they love that. these kids who grew up in the north of England and froze for years to get to go and hang out in a place, in the Bahamas with these, girls in bikinis. I mean, they weren't too interested in cinema at this point. They were just young guys having fun. This is the height of their popularity in really in many ways. This is before all the stuff with Imelda Marcos and the We're Bigger Than Jesus and all of that stuff. And so they're really in this kind of perfect place right now. And going to Austria, I mean, they had some fun with that too, skiing and doing all of that. So they're not that concerned with it, and there's not much input that they're giving. I mean, what happens too, George really discovers Indian music at this point,
Right.
through the film. And so he's getting into that. This is the beginning of his love affair with Indian music and getting involved with, Indian culture and Indian religion. So the fact that they're making this movie is kind of like they're all, and Paul's with Jane Asher and this is the movie. It's like another thing. It's like another bunch of shows or another bunch of TV appearances. It's not significant to them, and they're not part of the creative team of making the film. And I think they trust Richard Lester too. They
Right.
worked with him on a film, they trust him, and I don't think there's really much in the way of input. From what I can remember, again, this book came out 2 years ago in May, and the whole process was about 4 years. So we're going back now. I received my contract long before COVID. So here we are all these years later, all
Right.
those years
Right.
ago.
What about the transition from the name, from Eight Arms to Hold You, which held up pretty close to a release point to Help? Um, for those who don't know, why the name change when it happened.
I mean, it's just simple is that John and Paul couldn't come up with a song. I mean, it's like, you want us to write a song called Eight Arms to Hold You, and they just couldn't come up with anything. And then eventually it was going to be Help, but then that wasn't going to work because there was all kinds of things called Help. And so I think it was Richard Lester who came up with the idea. We just put an exclamation point and we copyright it and we're good to go. I mean, these are how
Right.
decisions were made back then. Now everything is 20 lawyers sitting in a room and focus groups and corporations and stockholders, and it's just a nightmare, you know. But
Right.
we literally could make a decision like that. I mean, I think the way they make movies nowadays is they make the poster first, you know, like they don't even know what the movie's going to be. You know what I mean? I mean, everything is just so concocted and by committee, and it's like they're designing a video game, you know,
Right.
where back then they could, it's the Beatles. We're gonna, we can do whatever we want. And Richard will say, "So what do you think?" And then John's like takes another hit out of the joint and like, "Yeah, that sounds fine." I know I'm being frivolous and a bit flippant here, but I think this is from what I remember. I mean, this was a lot of how it was. They were very disconnected from the making of this film, the four Beatles themselves, you know.
Mhm.
I mean, they had these great songs though. I mean, there are great songs. I have brought the soundtrack, even
Yep.
on the Capitol one. I mean, and we were talking about this before. I love all the sort of instrumental music and the bound music, the classical music or whatever. And I mean, even the Parlophone album. And I'm sorry about the glare here. This was one of those mono reissues, which I've listened to this. I just left the shrink on and the this little thing here. You can see that was a promo. This is a great album.
Yeah.
I love this album. It is a fun album. Is it Rubber Soul or Revolver or Sergeant Pepper? No. But you put this on and it's a wonderful album. They're very unself-conscious with the making of this music to me. They're at such a peak. You, you would hear about, they use this expression. I don't know if any of you have heard this, but John and Paul would get in this kind of heat of songwriting, and they'd have a song, and they were like, they didn't want to wait to record it, and they would like get the word to George Martin. We want to get in the studio and we want to record it right away, and they would do it quickly. They wouldn't wait a long time after, the writing of the song. And I think that is so captured, particularly with this period, because they'd go in and they wouldn't give it, they just let's just do it. And that's why it sounds so great,
Right.
and I think the technology is slowly improving at this point. They are certainly extremely comfortable in a recording studio at this point. This is not Beatles for Sale, which is kind of slapped together. Although again, I think it's an underrated album. They're very much, yeah, there's a certain amount of pressure to make the record because it's going to be part of a soundtrack. But it's a wonderful album, and it's a wonderful period as far as I'm concerned musically for them.
It's part of the magic of that time, as Paul has said very often, that he and John would write a song together, bring it to the studio. George and Ringo would not know the song at all, and they'd have to learn it real quickly. And part of the magic came from the spontaneity, as you had said, you know, a few takes or maybe 10 takes, but by the end of the day or a couple of days, it was done. And sometimes when you overthink and you do too much thinking, then that can harm the product in some way. So, and often Paul says this as though, he wishes he would do that more often when he records his own albums, not to
I
think
mean,
too much, just go.
the recording technology was so much more primitive is not the right word. I mean, they're just there's 4 tracks at this point, right? They're not up to the 8 tracks at this point. They only have 4 tracks, and they know Abbey Road. I mean, Paul lived around the corner, and they would just go in, and they know the team, they know the people, they know the place. There's such a comfort level, and the level of confidence that they have in their ability at this point. I mean, they're this is before any of the little cracks that would start later on, the issues
Mhm.
that they had touring, in particular, where there's so many things kind of went wrong at the end. So it's almost the it's almost the end of sort of the first peak for the Beatles. I think a lot of people listen to these songs from, whether it's whether it's this album or the other
Right.
one, you heard these songs as singles. You heard them as 45s, and that's how people listen to it. You heard it on the radio. You'd hear it over and over again, and there would be no cats involved. It would be
Sorry.
just music.
Sorry.
There would be no animals.
I'm sorry about that.
That's okay. I did a recent interview with somebody about another radio thing I'm involved with that has nothing to do with music, and the person had their cat there. So I'm used to cats on Zoom while I'm being interviewed. I'm comfortable with it now.
I
Alan.
mean, Help to me is an album, either version. Um, you really, that's where, in my book, they're about, the fuse is lit. They're about to now artistically explode. If you thought that they were consistent, um, super talented, whatever the fans were thinking about them at the time, Help is where they got in their rocket ship and they were about to take off to the stratosphere and break ground with every single song that they were coming out with. The mature level of maturity in the songwriting on Help, kind of sets the stage for Rubber Soul, and then the next level, these huge steps that started taking. To me, Help is where that all began. And the British version gives you a little more of a sense of that simply because there's more songs. You
Right,
hear where they were
right,
as a band as a whole at that point, as
right.
opposed to what is it? How many Beatles songs are in the US? Is it six?
Yeah, I believe so. But
Six.
this is such a wonderful, I know the Capital ones get a lot of gruff, but this is such a beautiful package. It's so great to have this, you know.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
kids
And
must
I,
have
yeah.
just got this and just stared at it for hours, you
Yeah.
know. because
And there was
the
something
Beatles for
about even the
Sale one
instrumental
didn't come
music.
out in this country, so they didn't. This is the first time they're getting this gatefold.
Right. There's also something about the instrumental music that you didn't, at least when I got a copy of Help, which I think I was probably around 9 years old, I never felt cheated that it was only half an album of Beatles songs. Because those instrumentals, the whole experience worked. For whatever reason, as a listening experience, the US soundtrack worked. I think even a little better than A Hard Day's Night did. And the music was very interesting.
It's more
That
varied
was
than the
written by
George
Ken
Martin
Thorne.
stuff. Yeah.
And anyway, did we throw it over to you already, Alan? No,
No, we didn't.
we didn't. Well, let's throw it at Alan now.
Okay.
Alan's
Maybe
next.
Beansy will come back and have
Yeah,
a few
so
words.
on my list of questions, the first one was going to be about the spy genre aspect of it, which, starts, at least on the album where you put the needle down and you hear the James Bond music. And there is that sort of sense of this is partly a Bond parody, but not quite, but an element of it. But since we talked about spy movies already, I was going to go on to the next sort of undercurrent that you talk about in the book, which is surrealism. Um, and you would think that like that would particularly appeal to John, but maybe it sort of was a little bit beyond John at the time. Maybe John hadn't got into surrealism yet because he's the one who complains most about the film, and you would
Right.
think that you know
It's interesting because, and we can't have a long conversation about surrealism. There is surrealism in A Hard Day's Night when they're outside of the train, running alongside the train. That's surrealism, in a general sense.
okay.
But with A Hard Day, with Help, it becomes a bigger thing, and the color aspect of it, enhances it.
Mhm.
So, and it's mostly Lester who
Yeah.
brings that sense of surrealism to both films, you
Hmm.
know. So they both have it. I think with Help visually, it has a more colorful canvas, so to speak, you know. Um, but yeah, it's you would think John would have been a little more plugged into that.
Maybe in a way, Hard Day's Night was a precursor for a lot of their interests that they hadn't quite thought about at the time of Hard Day's Night, because we talked about George and the Indian music. I mean, that sort of started there, and surrealism maybe for John, and maybe for Paul a little bit too. Um, the other thing that is interesting, both in the book and the things you've been saying, just earlier today, about the fluidity of the film and the way things have changed. Um, there seems to have been, I mean, the Beatles always talked about how they were saying, we want to go to the Bahamas. Can you write something for the Bahamas? So, like, is that probably is the extent of their input into what was going to happen, right? Or do you
Well,
even believe that? Is
no,
that even true?
actually, the whole idea of the Bahamas it was a tax
Tax
shelter.
shelter, yeah.
That's why they filmed there. But
Mhm.
also, again, and I know we're beating a dead horse here, one of the things that made the James Bond films so big was at that time, international air travel wasn't something that the common person did. It was a unique thing.
Mhm.
And so one of the things that made the Bond films so attractive to people was the exotic nature of seeing all these locales around the world that a lot of people in, say, America or even the UK had never been to.
Mhm.
And that was part of what it is. Now we all travel all over the place. It's a common thing. Anybody can jump on a plane. Children jump on planes when they're young and see all these exotic places. But in 1962, when the first Bond film came out, it was still new. It was more for people who had more money or people who travel for business or, from different parts of the world. So the reason why they did it in these different locales in Help was just to parody the spy films. So you've got obviously England, but you've got Jamaica. I'm sorry, you've got the Bahamas, but that's because it's a tax shelter. But then they also went to Austria too to add another exotic locale, and they can go skiing, and it's exotic, especially if you're in America and you're young. This is interesting. This is fascinating and unique. So it wasn't the Beatles had no input to say, yeah, we want to take us to the Bahamas. It was not their idea.
Hmm. They claim it now, though. Mm.
I mean, maybe Paul has said that. I think sometimes when
I think
people
Ringo
say
too.
things and then they're not entirely accurate, I don't think that they're totally trying to falsify information. I think they just have different memories of
Sure.
things.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know how many times I was somewhere with other people and we all remember it differently.
Hmm.
You know
Hmm.
what I mean? For various reasons
Yeah.
also.
Yeah.
Don't forget when they're in the Bahamas, they were all, enjoying the pleasures of tea. And so the memory of what happened there may not be the most accurate 50 plus years later.
Hmm. Um, Another thing is, Ringo as the focus. I think in Hard Day's Night, he became the focus almost by accident, because they each had scenes. Paul's was cut out, but Ringo's was the walk around, and that got an awful lot of attention for him. Is that why they made him the focus of Help?
I mean, he's just a natural. I mean, he is just he is this thing, whether he's how good a drummer he is, we could debate, where he stands in the group musically, but I mean, he's this person we gravitate towards him, and he just was a natural. Paul's always said he felt that even if Ringo had not been in the Beatles, he would have became a star. You know what I'm saying? And so it's just, I also think it works perfectly too because the other three are more responsible for the music, where Ringo is just the drummer. And I'm not saying that to be derogatory.
Mhm.
So it kind of works two ways. Ringo's a perfect focus,
Mhm.
to be the kind of this central character, so to speak, of the four of them. But it also gives him a bit more to kind of do because he is just kind of the drummer. Any of us here who read a lot about the Beatles in terms of when they're recording, we've heard these stories of Ringo spending hours and hours literally just sitting around Abbey Road waiting for his time
Learning to
to
play
do his
chess.
part,
Yeah.
you know? So he's someone that has a bit more time on his hands, but it just happened to work out that he's just a natural. And of course, he would go on to have a film career. He would be in other movies, and where the others never really pursued that. I mean, Sir John did a film with Richard Lester, and the others would do a thing here and there, but Ringo would go on to have a film career as an actor.
Yeah. And of course, the fact that the sacrificial ring was the thing that they're
Right.
going after sort of makes Ringo the natural one to have it. But I think possibly that plot was chosen to make Ringo the focus to a degree. Um, let's see. Uh, Outtakes. Um, on that big box set that you held up, there is a feature about an outtake with um can't remember her name. So she was a young
Eleanor
actress at the time, and
Eleanor Braun.
no. It was someone who was actually her whole thing was cut out of the film, so that she was only in the one scene, and they didn't use it. But there's also on YouTube you can find footage of John riding a bicycle in a pool. And that was apparently another outtake. Are there other outtakes you know of that either exist or you've seen the screenplay for, or things that were tried but discarded?
There seems to me to be a certain amount of film that what it looks like to me, it's almost like home movies.
Mhm.
It's like they're on the bicycles. I mean, that's part of the movie, but there's like outtakes of that, or there's like scenes of them sitting around. George's birthday occurred during the filming, I believe. I always forget now if it was in, I think it was in the Bahamas. So that was like a party and they performed at it. And this stuff leaks out and you can easily find it on YouTube, but nothing really like exciting. I mean, how these things, it's not like you see some performance or something interesting or John's working on a song that would come out on Rubber Soul or anything like that.
Mhm.
It isn't, there isn't that much of it. Anything that they had done at Twickenham, often was destroyed because that was the way they did things at Twickenham. They wouldn't save extra film because they didn't have anywhere to put it, if you can believe this. Um, so unfortunately, with these two early films, there is a certain amount of material that was destroyed, that was never saved. How worthy it is or how valuable it is, obviously we can't say. I'm sure that somewhere there's some stuff, and there has been things that have surfaced through the years, but nothing earth-shattering.
Mhm. And also, a few minutes ago, we were talking about the transition from Eight Arms to Hold You to Help. Um, and again, I guess this may feed into the fluidity of the filmmaking because at least for part of the process, when it was Eight Arms to Hold You, I mean, I think on the single of Ticket to Ride, it says from the Beatles filmmaker
Yes.
Hold You. Um, and yet, when you get to the end of the film, uh, and Leo McKern has the ring on, and they're about coming at him with the knife, and he says, "Help!" You don't hear him say it; you hear them on the record, and it just fits perfectly. I mean, that probably wasn't an accident, right? I mean, it could have been, but
No, I don't think it was. And you know what's interesting is if you see later singles of the song, like with the like orange capital label, it still says from the forthcoming film, Eight Arms to Hold You, which is
Yeah.
just amazing. You'd think somewhere somebody would have at EMI would have said, this is incorrect on this label. This movie Help came out, 8 years ago, you
yeah,
know. So it's so fascinating that they left it
They
on,
left it,
you
yeah.
know. And I don't think they left it on because they thought it was cool. I think they left it on because it's just the typical oversight of Capitol Records, you
right.
know.
hmm Or they might have, to change the label copy, they might have had to go through, 18 committees and
Right. Or spend money, or they would cost them money to do it. And we know how they are about that.
right, right. Um, let's see. Any idea why the semaphore on the cover spells nudge instead of help? I mean, they could have had them pose doing the right letters. Why didn't they?
I think these things just become they don't really know what they're doing and they shoot it and they're like, yeah, we're not going to fix that. We're not going to spend the time or the money. Or by the time they realize it, the Beatles are gone and they're off doing the next thing. I mean, I think it's great that it's a mistake. It's cool. I think that's one of those cool kind of things. It's so weird. You're going to think I'm crazy, but I can't tell you how long it took me. And I'm sure there are people who read it and said, you got it wrong, Steve, to figure out what color is this? Like what color is that blue? Like most people say, yeah, that's blue. But
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
see different versions of this over the years, and there's no consistency to it. And I try, this is how ridiculous you get when you're writing a book like this, because all the Beatle experts are going to read your book just to find all the mistakes. And so I tried to oh yeah, that's blue. It's got to be blue. But if you see different versions of this album over the years, it can look different. It can look black, or it can look like a different color. And again, I know there's people out there going, wow, you guys need to get out of the house once in a while,
Yeah.
you
That's
know?
There's
besides the
also
point.
no scene in the film where they're doing that.
Right, right. There is no scene in it.
I had heard that it didn't look, I guess, as
I've heard that.
pleasing, the HELP,
Right.
the
I've heard
position.
that too.
Yeah, whether or
But
not that had anything to do with it, they decided this doesn't really look good. So just go like this and,
right. I'm
you
sure all
know,
the answers are actually in this, if you really want to know
wow.
the true story. I've got this too, which is wonderful. I've got
Wow.
this for A Hard Day's Night, and I think for Yellow Submarine. I think those were the only three films. But
Right.
these are wonderful. I mean, if you go to the Fest for Beatle fans, you can find these, relatively inexpensive in good condition, and they're just so much fun to have, And I can remember when we were kids, somebody had one of these, I didn't, but they're just so much fun. They're novelizations,
Mm.
which
Yeah.
is a thing. A novelization is a thing where you have a film from a screenplay and they write a novel version of it. And in the literary world, that's like, that's low rent kind of stuff. But it's fun. It has some pictures in it, and they're wonderful. They're wonderful to have. So I have them for the three of the films at least. I don't think they
Yeah.
did one for Magical Mystery Tour, and I
No.
know they didn't do one for Let It Be.
No. Yeah, I've got those as well, and I've never read them. Are they just novelizations? Is there
I
like
think I
different book?
read them and there's stuff in it that, yeah, it's similar to the film, but there's things that are wrong because they don't make the movie and then say, okay, now let's do the novelization. They're done parallel
Mhm.
with it. So they're trying to follow whatever the script is or the story. And, there's no rhyme or reason to this stuff, but they're just fun to have. And, they can be fun to read. They're silly. It's a throwaway is what it is. And when they came out, this was 50 cents when
Right.
it came out. So now you could probably buy this a good condition one of these for like $10.
Maybe it has John riding his bicycle in the pool in the book.
Well,
It's funny because
I can
I
tell you that I
I
have the
look at
pictures in here, and I don't have my cheaters on, as John would say, so I can't say for sure. No, no, there's none. There's just a bunch of black and white pictures inside, and it's fun.
I'm
Um,
looking on eBay right now, and it's all the novel from the the movie The Help.
the
The,
Help. Yeah,
yeah, and
it's
and
yeah,
there was
the
one.
the
Like the
Beatles
knack.
in Help is what it says. The Beatles in Help, a novel by Al Hine. And I
Oh, that'll help.
researched Al Hine, who he is. So if you read this book, you read Act Naturally, I give you the Al Hine biography in great detail. He's a guy that he wrote a lot of books. I mean, he wrote a lot of stuff. So you can everything you ever wanted to know about Al Hine
That's
in
the
the book.
place to go.
Yeah.
But this is the best parody, of course. Signed by Ron Nasty. I got to meet
Right.
Ron in person.
Mm.
Truly, he is one of the most wonderful people. Anybody that's been to the fest and got a chance to meet him, he is just the sweetest man, one of the funniest, most talented people probably on the planet when he was here.
Mm.
And what they do with Ouch in here is
Yeah.
just, it's
Ouch.
priceless.
Yeah.
There's no question about it. Anybody that doesn't own this, and it comes with a gatefold and it has a wonderful book in it. If you're a fan of the Beatles and you do not own this, then you need to go immediately onto Discogs or wherever, and you have to own this. It is just the greatest thing in the world.
We were fortunate to have Ron Nasty at the fest several years ago. It was 1 or 2 years before he passed away, and he was just the nicest person. He gave me an interview, which is one of the most memorable ones I've ever done. And yeah, I questioned him. I don't understand what it takes for somebody like him, like Neil Innes, to write a song that's almost exactly the same as a Beatles song, but there's just something, just a little twist that he adds to it, and it's still its own song.
Right.
Don't know how you do that. Like,
He did
ouch.
it perfectly,
We
but
had
there,
him on the show, and he talked about how some things were a little bit too close for
right,
comfort.
Get Back,
Yeah,
they were sued for the Get Back parody song.
right.
Apple sued them for that. That was the only one of all the songs that they were because it was too much like it, which is just it shows you what a big heart Apple has, by doing that. You know, I mean, just, I think they all thought it was funny. Obviously, he participated in it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but it was like you said, to meet Neil, I never interviewed him, but, I talked to him, I took my picture with him, he signed it. He was just such a lovely guy. I mean, he was just like, he was everything you would hope Neil Innes would be.
Hmm.
And it was just so great to meet him. I know I sound like a fanboy, but that's okay.
Oh yeah, no, but someone like that, definitely.
Paul may have thought it was less funny than the others
Right.
did.
And I'm sure Yoko didn't appreciate chastity
Right.
too much, you know. But I think that John thought it was very funny, you know, and it's held up so well over the years. I'm much more of a fan of the Ruddles than I am of Spinal Tap, as much as I love Spinal Tap, truly love Spinal Tap.
Well, Paul is in the new Spinal Tap. You
Right. So I've seen the clips, which is perfect. I mean, that's just perfect. That's so great.
Yeah.
And they do the cut. I saw one of the pictures where they're doing a parody of the debut album from Crosby, Stills and Nash, which is great.
So Ken had more questions, I believe.
A few more. I wanted to ask you about all the classical music that was in the film. Was that all picked by Richard Lester, by Ken Thorne? And how did they go through the process of deciding which music was appropriate?
That's a good question. And I don't know if I have the answer for it right now because either I didn't get into it in the book or I don't remember the details. But I think I was able to find the exact recordings, like literally what was the album that they used, with the serial number and everything.
Uh-huh.
So honestly, I don't want to sound like somebody who should know this better, but I don't remember. Some of these, we forget that there was a time when people would make movies and do television shows or radio commercials or whatever, and you would literally just use found music. You would use copyrighted music, or you would use there were these libraries, these companies that would make what's called library music, where you
Mm,
could use it as beds for commercials
Yeah.
and stuff like that. And so I think it was just a question of I'm sure it was EMI um, albums that they used. It's
Mhm.
in the book. I,
Yeah.
I talk about this. I don't know if I quite answered the question that you just asked, Ken,
yeah.
but I did get into this because I wanted to know. I wanted to know what it was and find out exactly, where did they get this stuff? And of course, you bring up an interesting thing that George Martin does not do the music, the incidental music. It's Ken Thorne, who is a guy that did a lot of soundtrack music. And of course, the reason why Ken did it was because George Martin and Richard Lester had a falling out, and they did not get
Right.
along, which is kind of unfortunate. I mean, we hear all these stories over the years of just what a lovely guy George Martin is. I never had a chance to meet him or speak with him, but
Mm.
he's this person. He's this very avuncular, you know, figure, and I've never really heard anybody that didn't get along with him. But apparently, him and Richard Lester did not get along. Now, I don't know how that translated in terms of how George really felt about it. I don't remember if I got into this. I mean, I know in Ken Womack's um, double volume biography of George Martin, I used that a lot as a source about George, and of course George's own books that he did. So I don't remember, just to be honest. I wish I could remember everything that's in all 350 pages of this book crammed in. I've heard people say the type is a little small, Steve, but that's because they took my 500-page manuscript and cut it down to 350 pages. Alan, you would know nothing about that sort of, I would imagine, right?
Yeah. Um,
Can we just at least assume that Ken Thorne picked the music?
Yeah, I would say it was probably his decision. I mean, I think George had some involvement with the soundtrack. He wasn't totally out of the picture, because obviously he produced the Beatles music. So there must have been some coordination. Some of these things you look for, you research and you try to find, and it just doesn't exist because no one ever talked about it. No one ever really talked about, did George Martin and Ken Thorne sit down and talk about it? It's one of those things like for us, we want to know everything, you know,
Mm.
and some of these things there's just, or sometimes I could find something and it just, the source just didn't seem like it wasn't that it wasn't valid. It just, I couldn't tell how valid it was. You know what I mean? So, and Alan, you know more about, this kind of world than Darren and Ken, because it's just, you want to be accurate. I had one person point out one error in my book where I didn't write the title of I Just Seen a Face correctly. I wrote it as I Just Seen Her Face. So I admit that on camera. The whole world knows this now. But I did not have I've not had any other person point out any other mistakes in the book. Now, I'm sure they're there.
I could do what? There's
Okay.
one place where you called Leo McKern, Leo Kern.
Oh, okay. Well, that's a typo.
I know.
That's a
Hey,
typo.
hey, I
That's
know
not
about
a,
typos too.
that's not a, and that's the
Did
kind of
anyone
thing
try it? Was there any information about clearing the rights for those classical things that were used?
I don't know. I don't remember.
Because,
I don't remember if I covered it in the book and or I don't remember what I wrote because again, it's just you're getting into some arcane stuff. But these are great questions, and
because
I'm glad you're
years
asking them.
later, since we've got the Beethoven Ninth in this film, Michael Jackson used a snippet of George Sell's recording of the Beethoven Ninth with the Cleveland Orchestra, also a Columbia record, as I think Michael Jackson's was, and did not get rights for it, and the Cleveland Orchestra sued.
Okay.
Yeah,
I'm
so
sure whatever they had to do for rights here, I'm sure that was taken care of because I didn't come across anything where there was a problem. And if it was the case, it would have been pulled from the film by now
yeah.
and or from the soundtrack album.
It could have been like you say in those days people did things differently, and maybe back in those days people didn't think about suing over.
Right. Or if it was EMI, and I don't remember, it could have been EMI. If it was an EMI recording, or a Capitol recording, then maybe, obviously EMI has a huge classical library of music, So maybe that's how they do it. I'm glad you're asking this because even though I don't have all the answers, or I didn't come up with all the answers in the book, I felt I wanted to dig into this, and I wrote about as much of it as I could. Some people read some of this stuff, I'll be very honest, and they're like, Steve, you're going off here on like, but this is what, if you read Allan's books, if you read Mark Lewison's books, Bruce Spicer, this is what attracts people to these books is the minutia and the research and the scholarship. I'm not at a level of honestly what those three individuals write. One of them is right here with us, but I tried the best I could it's more journalism what I write than it is criticism. I'm not really interested in criticism. This is not an Ian MacDonald book,
So these
you
questions that you can't answer or haven't looked into, you can do during the revision of this book
It
when
would
the
be
second
nice.
edition
I
comes
would
out.
I would like to do a revision of the book. I would like to update it. You're always finding, I'm always reading, this book in particular, it was insane. I stopped, I was done with it. It was finished. It's over. There's nothing I can do about it. I kept reading Beatle books. It was almost like I was on this drug and I couldn't let it go. And I love it. I love to read books on the Beatles. I mean, Captain Obvious, Um, so I have a room in my house here. I call it my studio. It's like a little recording studio in there, radio recording studio. And I have all my music books in there and I have all my Beatle books in there. And it must be near 250 books on the Beatles that I have at this point. And I'm always adding more and I'm always reading more. I just, part of the reason you do this is not for me, is not because I'm an expert, is because I want to learn, because I know there's so much that I don't know and I want to learn more. And that's what I love about, your books, Alan, the two McCartney books, and especially Mark Lewison. I don't know if the three of you have read the full 1600 page version of Tune In,
Of
Mark
course.
Lewison's first volume. And I devoured it
Hmm.
and I just loved it. It was great. And I interviewed him after I finished reading it. And he gave me this really lengthy interview, which was just fantastic. And, it's just, you want to know that I feel like there's so much that I don't know, that I still don't know. And so, you know, um, all the answers and, I'm always, by the way, I'm always recommending other books on the Beatles to people. And here's a perfect segue. I pulled out a couple of books related to Help. I don't know if the folks out there know about these books, but this is a wonderful book about help. It's mostly a picture book, coffee table book,
Hmm.
but I highly recommend this book. It's really wonderful. And
Who's the
Richard
author?
Lester does a short little introduction. The name of it is called The Beatles Photographs from the Set of Help. It's by a guy named Emilio Lare. And I believe he was, if I remember this book, is he was one of the photographers on the set.
Hmm.
And it's a beautiful book. And I used this as part of my research. And then the other one that I pulled out today, you can see I spent a lot of time doing my research for this interview, is this wonderful book. And Simon Weitzman is one of the people involved with this book. And of course, we all know Simon from the
Hmm.
Fest for Beatle fans. His movie on Patty Boyd is showing right now on Peacock, it's a wonderful film.
Yep.
And Simon is a great guy. And the other two guys that are involved with this book their names are not on the cover, but that's another book I highly recommend people. Simon Wells, who's written extensively about the
Yeah.
60s music. Um, his books are great if you can find his books. And Paul Skellett, I believe, is the person that was involved a lot with the look and the design of this book. This has a bit more information in it, more text.
When did that come out? Because I'm not familiar with that one. Eight Arms
I don't
Told
have
You.
that one either.
Who said they're not? Alan?
I said I don't have that one either.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think it's in the back. The copyright date is in the back, I believe.
There's also something else that, we talk about
I don't
forgetting
know.
things as we get older. More and more, I'm finding out that I have a lot of this stuff. I just don't remember,
That you have it.
No,
and it's
my
often I have,
Beatle books are organized. I have them really organized
it's
because
Christmas time often in my house because it's like, oh, I didn't know I had this. When did I get? I just recently, one of Ken Womack's books, I just recently realized I had three copies of it. I don't know how I ended up with three copies of it, of the Harrison Clapton book that Ken wrote a couple of
okay.
years ago. But Ken, if you do watch this, I have three copies of that. Don't know how that happened,
I've
but
been doing things like that lately. I've been going through my albums and CDs and trying to organize them.
yeah,
And, maybe I want to try to cull them and move them out and finding amazing things, getting into a lot of jazz, listening to a lot of Miles
yeah,
Davis music,
yeah, yeah,
and
yeah.
discovering some CDs sound better than others and some don't sound very good at all,
Mm.
so
No,
that's another
yep,
story for another day.
absolutely. You can keep bum CDs jump out if you had a bad one.
Yep. I
So
mean, some
which
of them
version
just
of Kind of Blue are you keeping? Are you keeping
I
the
mean, I have a
original
number
or are
of
you doing
versions on vinyl and CD. I have all those box sets that they did, those like metal ones of Miles Davis,
Yeah.
but some of them, the sound quality is there's this thin kind of screechy and this is like 2000. You would think by that point, this is almost 20 years into digital music, they would have done a better job, but
Yeah.
they're still nice to have. They're beautiful packages and there's a lot of text. And so you do kind of when you have the amount of stuff that four of us have, I would imagine Darren, especially you, it
Well, what
must get
did me in,
insane.
of
But
course,
my Beatle books are pretty organized.
what did me in was the years when working in radio, and Ken would know this. I
Mm.
mean, it has dried up today, but back in the day, I'd be coming home on a daily basis with a little plastic bag or my my backpack or whatever I was carrying stuff in with new CDs, and it was often, do I really need the new
Dramarama.
stuff? Yeah, I sure I did. And now it's like, you can't come in my house without having a pair of hiking shoes on and,
Yeah.
you know, much
As
to
a
my
reviewer, the same with me. I would, for many years, it was vinyl and then it was CDs and, so, you know, uh, this is the kind of stuff that makes my wife break out into a cold sweat.
I'm just going to say, Steve's next book is going to be How to Keep Your Marriage Intact.
Hmm.
And I'll write the forward.
You marry a saint. That's how you keep your marriage intact when you have a music collection like I have. You marry a saint.
That'll
Speaking of
outsell all the
saints,
Beatle books too.
Yep.
speaking of saints, back at you, Ken.
Please. You gotta be kidding. I wanted to ask you, Steve, you do say that the idea for Help came from Lester and also the director, Joe McGrath. So you're talking about the actual plot and all the ideas behind it, or just that it's a spy film?
Well, not all. I mean, there was some input, there was some help from him. Sorry, I don't mean to be, I wasn't looking to make a joke there. So yes, yeah, and Joe would continue to be involved, with them. I think also with Magical Mystery Tour a little bit, not in an official capacity necessarily, but,
Hmm.
helping out with the story or whatever. He was somebody that was kind of always around, the Beatles world. But I don't think he was credited with anything from what I remember. But he was helpful. There's always people you read about with different projects that they may not be involved in an official capacity,
Hmm.
but are there to kind of help out or throw around ideas or be a sounding board.
But I wonder who came up with the whole idea of this cult going after Ringo for this ring.
Well, again, as I said very early in this, which it seems like we started this a couple of days ago, is there is a lot of similarities to The Moonstone by Wilkie Collins
Yeah.
in terms of the story, where they kind of borrowed a few of those ideas, as basic plot points or, part of the basis of the story. It's like an amalgam of things, and it was very fluid. There's no question about it.
Hmm.
And I don't think they had this like, tightly, put together script. Robert Town didn't write the script, it wasn't written by Joe Esterhaas, it was like, they had these ideas and, there's working scripts and their scripts change. And then they have a script and for 10 pages, they just cross it all out and they just improvise or they shoot something, well, that's not working or, what are we going to do? How do we get from L to N. I mean, these are not, like people like Stanley Kubrick would, storyboard everything. The level of meticulous filmmaking that goes into a Kubrick film, and it's one of the reasons why he didn't make so many films. Scorsese is like this to some degree. There's so much scripting and storyboarding and everything. Don't forget too, back then it was so much cheaper to make a movie and they weren't putting a lot into it. It was very much on the run making the movie. It wasn't this huge, lavish, Cecil B. DeMille production. It's a pop music movie,
Right.
essentially is what it is. And it certainly had a way bigger budget than A Hard Day's Night, but it was a lot more fluid.
Okay. Could you just explain the major actors that were in this film? Leo McKern, Roy Kinnear, Eleanor Bron. Did Richard Lester, well, obviously Victor Spinetti, um, did Richard Lester know ahead of time that these were the people that he wanted to be in the film?
He would mostly pick them, and a lot of these people he had already worked with and would continue to work with through the years. So it is very much him. I think the thing with Victor Spinetti though was the Beatles just loved him. They
Hmm.
just really loved working with him, and they wanted him to basically be in every film that he made. So a lot of these people, so many of the people, and I get into this in the book, so many of these people are the people who are making films in London, making British films.
Mm.
Whether it's the people on camera or behind the camera. And it's just like the typical casting. It's almost like any movie, like, well, who would be good for that role?
Mm.
It's interesting with Leo McKern. You see him in previous films, um, and he plays occasionally. I'll see him in a film where he's very serious. He plays a very
Hmm.
serious, dramatic role in a film. I can't think of a particular film off the top of my head, but it's a little jarring when you see him in a
Yeah.
film because you almost can't take him seriously because you're so used to this kind of bigger than life. In Help, he is this bigger than life kind of,
Cool.
parody of this cult leader. It's what they call these, scenery chewing roles, you know, and it's wonderful. Eleanor Braun and I talk about her in the book. She's a really fascinating woman. She really was, wasn't just there to look good. She really was a serious actress and she was involved with British theater. And she ended up writing a number of books. I believe she had a career as a photographer. She's really this Renaissance woman. She isn't just this, she's very attractive, there's no question about it, but she really is this amazing person and had a very long career and did like very serious things in comedy and theater. And she was somebody who was kind of part of the scene. She was part of the kind of London scene. And of course, Victor Spinetti, I mean, is just, I guess it's Patty Gallo is her name, who writes
Yeah.
about her,
Uh-huh.
writes about Victor, got to know Victor. And I mean, he's just one of these people who's just so wonderful. And the Beatles just loved him. They just hit it off with him. And, you know, he's in all these films. He's in all the films. He's just wonderful. He's so different, really, in A Hard Day's Night, Help, um, um,
Magical
Magical
Mystery.
Mystery Tour. He's so different in each one of them. He
Yeah.
plays kind of a completely different but over the top kind of person. Almost in some ways unlikable characters in some ways, but he's such a likable person, and they just loved him. And of course, he did a theater version of one or two of John's books
Hmm.
later on. He's in the Prince film, I believe, Under the Cherry Moon or whatever it's called.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he's in that film,
Huh.
which shows you how long he stayed around and continued to be around and continue to do things. He has an interesting filmography if you see it.
He's also in the Wings video for London Town.
Okay, well there you go.
Right. Yeah.
A great
Well,
video, by the way, which I love, from an album that I love.
very good. There's one more thing I wanted to bring up, but it's not all that pleasant. Something
Uh-oh.
discovered in the book
Uh-oh.
about Roy Kinnear.
Yes, I,
And,
I was trying to avoid that, but it's not a happy story.
Yeah.
yeah,
I can I can talk about it and I can encapsulate it because I know this question is a tough one.
yeah, because Roy Kinnear died while he was uh in was it the Three Musketeers?
Yes, I
Yes, and he
believe
fell
so.
off a horse in the
Yep,
making of it.
yep.
He died in the process of that happening, and Richard Lester never got over it
Nope.
to
And
the
I
point where,
tried really hard to write this and be accurate because it is very controversial. I tried to get anybody I could who worked on the film to talk about it, and I couldn't get anybody. Um, to make a long story short, there was a scene where a horse just got out of control and he fell off the horse. And they thought, okay, he's hurt, but he will be okay. And he died. And there was lawsuits, and I get into the whole long story of it. And I tried as hard as I could to be accurate and to be fair in reporting it. Some people wanted to blame Richard Lester. I mean, I didn't really see that he did anything wrong. This was just an accident. It just happened. but it really affected Richard Lester in a way that he really it almost was the beginning of the end of his film career. He said right away he just didn't want to work on a film where there was any kind of real action or any possible danger or
Mm.
anything like that. He was so spooked by this whole experience because they were really good friends and they worked on many films together. And it was pretty much the end. And what's interesting is I think Paul kind of knew this and got him to do the Get Back
Right.
video. And I think he did that because he was trying to get Richard kind of back on his mental
Oh,
feet
wow.
again. I don't know if I said that in the book or not, but it was, Richard took it really seriously. It wasn't like something where he got over it and put it behind him. He just could not do it. And it really derailed his career. He derailed his own career. He could have continued to work if he wanted to. And I go into great detail about this, and it was the hardest part of the book to write. And I didn't know about it before I started working on the book. And I
Mm.
almost was feeling like, oh, am I really going to put this in? And this is one of the reasons why the manuscript became so long, because you discover things as you're doing research, things you knew nothing about, or you may have heard about it or read about it, and you forget about it. And I felt like I couldn't treat this in passing in a few sentences or a few paragraphs. So I do get into it. I know some people probably check out during a part like this, or it becomes like a big buzzkill, but it's real people, and you see that these are real people. We think of some of these people, actors or musicians or whatever. They're these iconic people that we never meet. And some of us we do get to do it because we're in the media, but they're real people. And it was really, McKern was he was I'm sorry, Roy Kinnear was he was a beloved figure in films.
Mm.
And it's a really tragic story, but I had to talk about it, and I do. It's in
Yeah.
the whole story's in the book, and to get into it here would be impossible.
Sure.
But what you say in the book is like, apart from the accident, like you said that, he was brought to the hospital, he was in good spirits, and he died of a heart attack the next
Right.
day.
Yeah.
I mean, he could have had the heart attack the next day anyway, even if he hadn't fallen off the horse,
Well,
possibly.
I think sometimes what happens is people have an accident or something like this happens, and it seems okay, and then it hits them later. You know
Yeah.
what I'm
Yeah.
saying?
The
The shock,
trauma.
it's like a delayed shock
Yeah.
almost, you know?
Yeah.
Very sad,
Mm,
truly sad
Yeah.
on many levels.
sure.
Did Lester talk about this at length at all in any interview or?
I think I did quote him in the book that I found somewhere. I don't remember what the source was, but I do name the source. If
Right.
it was an interview with a magazine or it was in a book, I do say where it comes from. So you can go and you can read that and know where it came from. And I'm sure it was something he said much later. It wasn't something that he said right after it happened.
Mm.
It's such a shame. I mean,
Yeah,
it tragic ending with Roy Kinnear, but Richard Lester was so brilliant. He
yeah.
could have gone on and made more great films.
That's right. The Musketeer films are wonderful. Those are wonderful movies. I mean, they
Really.
are just great movies. He did the Three Musketeers, and I think there was the Four Musketeers, if I'm not mistaken. And they're both excellent. I think he did both of them, and they're great movies, especially the first one. Just fun. And you see what a great filmmaker he is.
Mhm.
He did comedy so well. He was able to, in very subtle, The Three Musketeers is a subtle kind of comedy to it. It's not a comedy movie, but there is a lot of comedy in it. And it's
Hmm.
just wonderful. And it shows you he's a very underrated film director. There's no question about it. Steve Soderbergh is a huge fan, and they actually did a book together where it was really Soderbergh interviewing Lester, but Soderbergh kind of talking about what's going on with him at the same time. It's a very unique kind of book. If anybody out there is interested, can find it. But Lester was a huge influence on Soderbergh.
Wow. You think that because Lester was so involved with not only the Beatles, but the Goons, who influenced the Beatles. He worked with people in television who were in comedy. That all affected his film work.
Oh yeah. I mean, totally. There's no question about it. I mean, I think, he was involved in television and advertising, making ads in England where it was exciting to be involved in those mediums, where they
Hmm.
were trying new things and trying to be creative, and where movies took such a long time to make, the TV shows were live or the commercials were just commercials. So you made them quickly and the budgets were smaller and you could be very creative. And he was an American and he had a kind of a different, viewpoint. He was very young. He was this really smart guy. He went to UPenn for psychology. He's a musician. He was this very precocious, not in a negative way,
Hmm.
person. He was always, as a child, he was just very smart. It's interesting how he ends up in film, that's where he finally ends up. He probably could have been a doctor, or something. I mean, he was so smart. He was such a quick mind. And of course, the Beatles just loved him and the fact that he worked with the Goons. I mean, none of this is an accident, how he ends up being the guy to direct the first two Beatle films. It's a meeting of the minds. The Beatles love smart people. They love witty people, musicians, Americans, anything American. The Goons, they love the Goons, you know. I mean, Peter Sellers is, you know, I'm one of the people who's, at the top of the Peter Sellers fan club list. I mean, he is just, there is no one like Peter Sellers. I mean, there's no one today, to me, that can touch him. I mean, the brilliance, people say, who is he? He gets lost in his roles where people have said we don't really know who this guy Peter Sellers is because he's become these collection of roles and he changes so much over the years. I mean, some people just know him from being there or
Yeah.
as Inspector Clouseau or whatever, or maybe they saw Dr. Strangelove. But, I could talk about Peter Sellers, all day. He is just, to me, it is just, I mean, I use his lines constantly. The REM album, Life's Rich Pageant, that's from Peter Sellers. He says
Oh,
that in
right.
one of the Pink Panther movies. That's where that comes from. It's all part of Life's Rich Pageant. Now, is that a line that he came up with, or was it in the script? I'm gonna bet he came up with it, but there'll be somebody out there that'll know the truth and they'll put it in the comments.
Does your dog bite?
We're driving down the road and you see, oh, it's a bimp. There's a sign for a bimp, you know? I mean, I use this all constantly. I can't stop it.
All right, Alan, Darren, you have any last questions?
No, I do. I don't. Alan?
No, I'm good, and we should probably let Steve go because it's been a couple of hours.
This has been fun. I love it. I love being with
Time
these three
flies.
legends here, you know? So for me,
Uh,
the two
are you
radio
talking about me?
legends
You
and
talking
the
about?
and the great writer over here. So to me, this is a thrill. I love doing this. This is fun. I appreciate that you asked me to do this. Thank you.
Who's
Oh,
paying
it's
that
our
off?
pleasure. Anytime you want on, you just ask us.
Okay.
Uh, my cat Beansy just barged in several times.
Cats on Zoom.
Mhm.
Girls on film.
He's actually now beyond eating his
Right.
dinner
Okay.
time. So he's getting a little ornery and he's doing everything in his power to distract me. I hear claws in the rug, which he's not supposed to do, and
Okay.
pick at the rug, and now he's zooming around.
As long as he stays
So
away from the vinyl and the books.
somehow they are all over the place for him to, and keep getting told, you don't want him to climb on them? Move them. He doesn't, he hasn't really picked at anything.
No, you're lucky. We
He
have no
scratched the
pets.
cover of my this year's Mets yearbook, but that was because he climbed in the bag and I forgot to take the book out of the bag and cat went in the bag. And
The cat
anyway,
in the bag, as opposed to
Maybe
the cat in the hat.
That could have been
He's been
critical.
watching how the Mets have been playing lately.
Yeah.
I knew that was coming.
Yeah.
All right. So before we go, why don't we just tell all the folks what we're up to?
All right.
All right, Darren, how about you?
Okay. You can catch me on WFUV Monday through Thursday nights, starting at 10 p.m. till 2 a.m. and Saturday afternoons from 1 until 4. Right before Mixed Bag, Pete Fornatel's old show, which Don McGee hosts on Saturdays on FUV. And WFUV is at 90.7 FM. For those of you in the New York City metro area, if you have reception issues, you could always listen to us online at WFUV.org. And also Facebook, 2 Facebook pages. Track me down on one or both of them. And of course, I'll see you on Talk More Talk. We're going to be recording a show later in the week.
Yep, absolutely. Alan?
Well, I'm just doing the usual and pretty much the same thing I say every show. So, because I just, do my stuff, mainly to do with getting volume 3 together. And I should mention, we've mentioned the books a couple of times, but we haven't mentioned my co-author, Adrian Sinclair, who is,
Mm.
very much a big part of this. And so I just should mention him. We have you can get in contact with me on Facebook, either at Allan Kozinn or Allan Kozinn Remixed. And there is a McCartney Legacy Facebook page, which Adrian runs. Um, you can, check into that. You can follow us here at the show on Twitter at Things We Said Fab, or on BlueSky at just Things We Said Today. You can write to all of us here on Things We Said Today radio show at gmail.com.
We got to change that.
Yeah, maybe we should. It's hard to remember, and sometimes I have to, when I post the show on Facebook, I have to sign in and remember that, what the hell is that name? Okay. Um, yeah, we have a group Facebook page, Things We Said Today video podcast, and you can find the show itself on YouTube, on Podbeam, any place where, fine podcasts are hosted, Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, you name it. So I think that is basically it for me.
Okay, I'll be next because we saved the best for last, you see.
Hmm.
I like to build drama in the show. If you want to get in touch with me, my email address is everylittlething@att.net. You can always friend me on Facebook at Ken Michaels. On my own YouTube channel, Ken Michaels Radio, I just finished doing my 12th, what I call Ultimate Beatles Trivia Show. And I had John Borak on the show. He is a contributing editor for Goldmine Magazine, also known for, do I have the book here somewhere? Here it is. The Beatles 100 Pivotal Moments in Beatle History, which just came out in paperback, by the way. So he is a paperback writer. And along with John Borak, I have Ed Ryan on the show. Ed is a Long Island musician, and when I first started doing my Beatles show on college radio in March of 1982, before I was on WDHA in New Jersey, I was on the air on college radio for a year and a half. Ed was my co-host for a full year. We just met each other in a record store. We became good friends. I found out he was a big Beatle fan. And as the story goes, he lived 2 blocks away from me, and I never knew it. So he and I became co-hosts, and that's how the show started before I went to New Jersey radio. Also, Fred Velez is on the show. He is known for being a big Monkey man, lover of the Monkees music as well as the Beatles. He's written a couple of Monkees books, A Little Bit Me, A Little Bit You, and A Little Bit Me, A Little Bit You, too. And all three of them are co-hosts on this show, or they're contestants for the Beatles trivia. And it's a fun show. And it's a mixture of easy and challenging trivia questions and games. Darren's been on the show. Maybe I'll get Allan on one of these days. And that's my latest one there. I also did an interview with Kyle Hand. He's one of the co-hosts of the new Beatles podcast called Hands Across the Water. He's doing a show called The Deeper You Go, which is 10 deep tracks, in this case from Paul's solo career. On my other podcast, Talk More Talk, a solo Beatles video cast with Kid O'Toole and our own Darren DeVivo, we just did a show on Paul McCartney's duets in his solo career in celebration of his new duet with Barbra Streisand of My Valentine. We are going to interview Gary Van Syok this coming Friday, Gary being the bass player of Elephant's Memory, to talk about the one-to-one concert. We're going to have him on our show too. Probably, I'm thinking more when the box set comes out, so we can talk more about the box set to make the shows different. So look out for that. Talk More Talk, the new show with Gary Van Syok, which will be posted probably this weekend. And then there's my radio show, Every Little Thing, which you can listen to. The best way is on WFDU's website, WFDU.FM. You can stream it live. I'm on Saturday mornings at 6 a.m., Sunday mornings at 8 a.m. Eastern Time. But you can also go into their archives and listen to the last 2 weeks worth of shows. They're actually two different shows each day, Saturday and Sunday. So there's 4 shows you can listen to, but they're each up for 2 weeks. So if you can, check out Every Little Thing. Just did a Beatles back to school set as part of my show. And I believe that's it. And now, like I said, saving the best for last. Steve Matteo, what's going on with you?
Well, I am on the social media that the kids are into these days. The death of culture, and AI will end it all. But yeah, I'm on Facebook. On Twitter, BlueSky, and Instagram, I think how I have it is Matteo Media. Okay. This great media empire that I've built by myself. So look for me there. I'm on Substack. I've been doing Substack.
What is Substack? Can you explain that?
It's it would take another whole show for it. It's if you want to write things, you can put it on Substack. So that I'm part of this. That was a great answer, wasn't it, Darren?
People can subscribe to it. You might mention
Yeah,
that.
you subscribe to it, then you get the email and you can read it, or you can go on Substack and read it. And I'm on that as Media Free New York. But I think the way it is Media Free NY. But you can look for my name. I don't know why I came up with that name. I think I did it as a toast to the destruction of public radio and Radio Free Europe. But we're not going to go there. So let's just forget I even said it. I write every week for the Vinyl District, which is a great website. I mostly do reissues for them, vinyl reissues, box sets, that sort of thing. I also write occasionally for Something Else Reviews. I'm going to have a review of the Doobie Brothers show that I saw Sunday night, which was excellent.
How great were they?
They were great. I mean, Michael McDonald's on this tour.
Yeah.
And it was great. I don't review a lot of shows. I really don't. I don't do much in the way of interviews as much anymore either.
Steve and I went to see the Doobie Brothers at the Beacon Theater.
That's right.
We went one night.
We
It was
went
supposed
one
to be
night,
two. And the first show, which I had tickets for and missed because of the weather, they ended up, I forget if they canceled it
I don't know.
but they were performing the albums Toulouse Street and The Captain and Me
in their
in their
entirety.
entirety. They ended up doing both albums on the same night due to the weather. Steve and I are there, and there is an absolute nanosecond where you can see the two of us in the audience.
Right,
I
on
mean,
the
you
DVD,
really
the
have
Blu-ray.
to
Yeah.
get the Blu-ray and stop it and
Yep.
and you see,
They're there.
this tall guy and his little fire hydrant
Wow.
next to him. So
We had a lot of fun. I was able to get Patrick Simmons' guitar pick that night. Beautiful pick. They were throwing them out
that's
in the
right. I
audience,
remember
and we
that.
were up front, and I saw one just kind of go, and I walked
Yeah.
over and just picked it right up and took it home. And yeah, and I did this. I just did this film festival where I asked
Right.
questions of some directors. The Long Island Music and Entertainment Hall of Fame International Music Documentary Film Festival.
It's a long.
And yeah, I know that's a long one. And I've been actually doing some sort of media reporting for WUSB FM in Stony Brook, doing some like interviews with people in the media to talk about the media and where we're at with the media. Um, it's going to move over to another show and time slot because the host is leaving the country to go to Wales to get a graduate degree. So that's another thing that I've been doing that's been interesting to do. And I'm always getting into trouble. And I try to stay out of trouble. Like Dennis the Menace, he really wasn't a bad guy. He was a good kid, but darn, he just got into trouble all the
Yeah.
time. And that's kind of me. And that's, I think, the best way to sum up where I'm at.
All
Well,
right.
I hope you keep getting into trouble, Steve.
You know,
All
it's been
right.
great. Thank you guys. I always love hanging out with the
Thank
three of
you.
you.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you.
Yes. Thanks, Steve, for joining us. And so I'm going to ask the three of you to say to me right now the appropriate ending for this show. Please say no more.
No more.
No, no, no. Say, please
Say,
say no more.
Say no more.
please say no more.
Nevermore.
Nevermore.
Did you get it with the script?
Say no more.
Supposed to say, please say no more. Those four
Please
words.
say no
All
more.
of you together.
Please say no more.
Please say no
Oh, I
more.
got it.
Please say no more.
Please say
Allan?
no more.
I can say no more.
I'm supposed to say that.
Please say no more.
No more.
To the window.
Thanks to all of you for watching.
Thank you.
See,
We'll
we're
see
just
you next
we're,
Buy the book, please.
we're
I
trying
have to
to
eat. I need
we're
food.
trying to recreate the Beatles being high, filming help, and not getting the lines right.
Come to the
I
window.
think we succeeded.
Go.